Yes, greetings, greetings. Greetings. Welcome to the Stephen Kanyinge Njoroge official channel. I am streaming live from Nairobi, Kenya, in East Africa. Welcome to my channel. I want to thank the Almighty God for life, keeping me alive, keeping you alive. I thank God for His mercies. I thank God for the gift of salvation through His Son, Jesus Christ. I want to thank all my subscribers, all my viewers, returning viewers, new viewers. Thank you very much for your support. So I want to talk about Kenya. Kenya is a country in East Africa, and we are going through a historic moment. What can be referred to as the Gen Z revolution, where our young people, the Gen Zs, have been protesting on the streets of Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, and other towns all across Kenya, 36 counties out of 47. From last month, June, and they were protesting against the Finance Bill 2024. And they wanted Parliament to reject the bill. And on the 25th of June this year, Parliament sat to pass the repugnant finance bill. And our young Kenyans, the Gen Zs, marched on the streets of Nairobi and other towns. And this was a historic protest. A few minutes after the House passed the finance bill, the protesters stormed Parliament. Never happened in Kenya's history. Our parliament buildings have never been stormed or invaded, but it happened on the 25th of June. The young Kenyan protesters invaded parliament, and our members of parliament had to run away for their dear lives because our young people lost confidence in that parliament. Parliament refused to listen to the voices of the voters, to the voices of Kenyans. Liz Mu, hello, hello. Welcome, Liz Mu. And young Kenyans were shot dead outside Parliament, and at least I saw one who was shot dead inside the presence of Parliament when he was coming out of Parliament. On record, 41 Kenyans were shot by the police, and many more are unaccounted for. At this moment, we don't know how many young Kenyans were shot dead by the police. However, the 25th of June is and will forever be a historic day in Kenya's history. Kenya will never be the same again. It's on that day that young Kenyans took back their sovereignty, their power, which they had donated along with other Kenyans who voted on the 9th of August 2022. As we all know here in Kenya, the president, William Ruto, withdrew the finance bill. And on Thursday, he sacked his entire cabinet. Now, the Gen Z revolution is not happening in a vacuum. Just like our forefathers and foremothers resisted foreign occupation, colonization, our young Kenyans have resisted foreign interference in our national affairs. They have resisted the IMF and America from trying to control our government and our economy by drafting finance bills, by influencing policies in our government. This is a historic moment in Kenya. The first recorded resistance against the British was by Mekatilili Wamenza of the Giriama people at the coast. She led the Giriama in resisting British colonial occupation. We had also Otenyo in Kisii land. He was a warrior who led the Abagusi to resist and fight British colonialism. And then we had the Nandi resistance in the Rift Valley, led by Koitalel Arap Samoei from 1900 to 1915. It was a 15-year resistance. Political parties like the East African Association led by Harry Thuku, and they began to agitate for several issues. The abolishing of the Kipande system, to have their land back, and basically fighting for the freedom of the African people, the Kenyan people. In 1922, we also had the Kikuyu Central Association, formed in 1924 by the likes of Job Moshushu, Jesse Kang'ethe, Jomo Kenyatta, James Bilter. All these were forms of protests against injustice, oppression, and colonization In 1920, this land that we call Kenya was given that name for the first time. It was referred to as the Kenya Colony in 1920. And we remained a colony until 1963. So the Mau Mau, that is the Kenya Land and Freedom Army, went to the forest in 1952, led by young men. Led by General Madenge and Dedan Kimathi. Dedan Kimathi Waciuri. They were mostly from the Mount Kenya region. Kikuyus, Merus, Embus. We also had Kambas in the Mau Mau, even Masais, and even other tribes. And they were fighting for land and freedom from 1952 to when Kimathi was captured in 1956. Kimathi was hanged in 1957, 18th of February. As that was happening in the forest with the Mau Mau, we used to have some young Kenyans in Nairobi and other urban areas agitating for independence through the trade unions. And chief among those was the late Tom Mboya. So all these forms of protests and resistance and the liberation struggle in Kenya led to the Lancaster House Conference, 1960 to 1962, where our leaders then, KANU, led by the late Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, and KADU, led by the late Ronald Ngala, went to the Lancaster House in London to negotiate the constitution which will govern our nation and our independence. So we gained our independence in 1963, December 12th. But still, the governor, who was a white man, was in Kenya. Kenya was not yet a republic. Mzee Jomo Kenyatta was a prime minister, but there was a governor, Malcolm MacDonald, who was the head of the state. The Queen was still the head of the state of Kenya. So after 1 year, December 12th, 1964, we became a republic, and the British governor left Kenya, and Mzee Kenyatta became president. So I've just given that brief history of the resistance, protests, and the liberation struggle for our independence. So the Gen Zs are those who are born between 1997 and 2012. So they're between the ages of 12 years and 27. And they were resisting the finance bill. Now, among the young Kenyans who were killed by the police on 25th of June is Erickson Chalo Mutisia. Mutisia, I am reliably informed, was also a member of Bunge la Mwananchi. He was buried yesterday in Machakos County. Now, this is interesting because I was, in my youthful days, a member of Bunge la Mwananchi. Bunge la Mwananchi in Swahili means the People's Parliament, and it's still based in Jivanjee Gardens. This is a public space, a public park in Nairobi City. Now, I joined Bunge la Mwananchi in 1997. This is the year when the Gen Zs were being born. the first batch of the Gen Zs. So I joined the Bunge la Mwananchi in 1997. Then it was called Kikao. Kikao in English means a sitting. And we will discuss various issues, national issues, local politics, even global politics and issues. In this time, the late Daniel Arap Moi was Kenya's president. And in 2002, we had a general election, and KANU was the ruling party, the Independence Party, and he proposed Uhuru Kenyatta to be the candidate for the presidential election. Now, some senior members of KANU left KANU because they thought they would be the presidential candidate. Among them, the late Vice President, Professor George Saitoti. The Honorable Raila Odinga was also in KANU at that time. Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka. They left KANU and they joined Mwai Kibaki, who was in the opposition, Charity Ngilu and the late Michael Wamalwa, and they formed the National Alliance Rainbow Coalition, NAC. So I was in Bunge la Mwananchi as a young man then, and the whole country was behind Mwai Kibaki, apart from the Rift Valley and some parts of Central Province. Then you had 8 provinces in Kenya. But the mood of the nation then was that we needed a new president from another party. We could no longer continue with KANU in power. So Mwai Kibaki was voted by a majority of Kenyans, 70%, in the election of 2002. He won by a landslide. So we were there still as Bunge la Mwananchi, and here Mr. Kibaki is the president. Kenyans are very optimistic, but we realized that it was not just a matter of having a new president, but the values guiding the leaders. So I remember in the month of January 2003, the first month of Kibaki's presidency, we organized a protest as Bunge la Mwananchi in Nairobi. We were a small group against the River Nile Treaty, which basically gives Egypt and Sudan rights over the use of the River Nile waters, which, of course, the River Nile originates from East Africa, Kenya, Uganda. And I remember the late broadcaster, Waweru Mboro. He came to Jivanji Gardens. He heard about our debates. He listened, and he approached us to start a political program on television. And we agreed. So from 2003 January to August, we were appearing on Citizen Television, Citizen TV, every Sunday, 7:30 p.m. for 8 months. That's how Bunge la Mwananchi gained national prominence and exposure. And we were discussing issues dealing with the nation. So Bunge la Mwananchi was a social movement, tribeless, partyless. It's just that we didn't have the advantage of technology that the Gen Zs have today. So I was there in Bunge la Mwananchi, and we thought of how we could reach out to many people with our message. So as Bunge la Mwananchi, we decided to form a political party, Chama cha Mwananchi, in 2005. I was the interim Secretary General of Chama cha Mwananchi, and the interim chairman was Ezra Kipkoech Kiprop, aka Dorobo. But the government denied us registration of the party, but they gave a politician the same party, that is the Honorable Koigi wa Wamwere, was given that party, Chama cha Mwananchi, because they feared that if they could have registered this party, Chama cha Mwananchi, the name was very catchy. The name was relating to the common Mwananchi. We could have gained support of many Kenyans and probably win the election. So they give Koigi wa Wamwere this party, Chama cha Mwananchi, and years later in 2016, he folds up Chama cha Mwananchi to join Jubilee Party, because Jubilee in 2016 swallowed almost, I think, 9 parties, including Chama cha Mwananchi. But Koigi wa Wamwere never went anywhere with Chama cha Mwananchi, because it's not about the certificate of registration, it's about the spirit of the members. So we envisioned a Kenya without tribal discrimination or tribalism, corruption, and that was how our party was stolen or given out to a politician. So we went out to Kencom. Kencom is the Kenya Commercial Bank building, headquarters in Nairobi. There's a bus terminus there. And I, with Mr. Kiprop, we went there for 1 full year, from November 2004 to November 2005, speaking publicly, addressing the public on politics, on issues about Kenya and the world. So I'm saying this because one of the young men shot dead in the Gen Z's demonstrations was a member of Bunge la Mwananchi, Erickson Chalo Mutisia. The Gen Z revolution is unstoppable. 80% of Kenya's population is below 35 years. The Gen Zs between the ages of 12 and 27, maybe there could be 20 million. So this is a big population, and they can't be ignored. They are fearless, they are tribeless, they are leaderless. They are taking leaders to account. They are holding our leaders to account. Parliament has failed Kenyans. Parliament became a house serving the president. Yet we voted for our parliamentarians to represent us, to be our voices in that house. But they chose to ignore our voices. They chose to be used by the president. They serve the president. They don't serve Kenyans. They don't serve their voters in the most important function that they have, which is legislation. to legislate, is to make laws. And in the matter of the finance bill, they ignored the voices of the public, of the voters. They chose to obey their master, the president. And the Gen Zs chose to storm parliament. It's never happened in Kenya before. That has changed Kenya forever. That day is when Kenyans, through the Gen Zs, took back the power that they had given to members of parliament. Because parliament no longer represents Kenyans. Parliament became or has become a rubber stamp for anything coming from the presidency or from the president or from the executive. This finance bill was drafted by the IMF. And I had them, I think, last evening addressing Kenyans from, I guess it was Washington, D.C. or somewhere, expressing their deep condolences to what happened in Kenya. So the IMF, they give countries loans, and of course they make something out of it, because these loans are paid back with interest. Do we need a finance bill every financial year? Kenya can't grow through overtaxation, over borrowing, and of course stealing. So the Gen Zs have done what my generation, other generations, political parties, political leaders, even the church failed to do. Is to speak up and act in a patriotic manner. And now they are saying that Ruto must go. It's not just about the finance bill. I think my sound is okay from my end. Lizmo, I think from my end the sound is okay. Can you hear me? I think from my end, I can't see any sound problem. Yeah, so the sound is okay. Sound is okay. Sound is okay on my end. So the issue is beyond the finance bill. It's about governance. It is about corruption. And the cabinet was fired the day before yesterday because they did not perform their duties to the expectations of the public. So it's about governance as well, because the way the finance bill was approached was an issue of governance, because governance is about listening to the people, the public, taking their views into account. And so Kenya has become a country of the minority, where the country works for the minority. The system works for the minority. The government works for the minority. And the majority suffer. So we want a Kenya where the Kenya is for all, where everybody is equal and there are equal opportunities for everyone, especially for the young people. So there are many issues, but it's just that the finance bill was the trigger to unearth all these issues that they are raising, which are fundamental and they affect everyone. There's the issue of our debt, and they have demanded for a debt audit. And the debt audit can be done from the government itself. But we want to know how much money we owe and to who has loaned us money, how much, and where did this money go? How much are we paying as debt every month? What is our public debt and our external debt? Because public debt is the debt which the government borrows from our local banks. Because our government borrows from our local banks. It borrows from Equity Bank, Kenya Commercial Bank, Cooperative Bank. That's public debt. And then there is the external debt, which our government borrows money from external financiers like the IMF, the World Bank, commercial banks, and other private financial entities like pension funds, etc. So we should know, because we are paying these debts through our taxes. That's a governance issue, because we don't know how much money we owe. We don't know how much money we pay every month as debt. I remember also, we have taken, I think, 3 or 4 Eurobonds. The first Eurobond was in 2014, $2 billion. That's a lot of money. Where did this money go? And 2 other Eurobonds. Because borrowing is not a problem. The problem is, how do we spend this money? Because these loans should have a public interest, public benefits. For example, more roads, more schools, pay our teachers more, our doctors, improve our health facilities, stock them with medicine and equipments everywhere to the ward level. But where did this money go? We also have our taxes. We also require a tax audit. How much money do we collect every month from the KRA? And how much is used to where? Because it's our money. Now, these are the governance issues. that have bedeviled this government. Our young people don't see any hope in this country. Their dreams and aspirations are not being met in this current situation. The government has failed our young people. The church has failed Kenya and the young people. The church was used to sanitize these politicians. In fact, the church campaigned for this government and for William Ruto to become president. And so they have been silent for this past almost 2 years. And it took the Gen Zs to call out the government and even the church for their failure to criticize factually the government, to demand action from the government, to demand accountability, to demand right decisions for the public good. The Gen Zs are not stupid. They're educated, they articulate, they've been forced to analyze parliamentary bills. They've been forced to read our constitution. They are now the ones liberating our country. Well, for those who are a bit old enough, in the 1980s, those who are intellectuals then, those who are politically active, rightly said that the problem in Kenya was the constitution, that it gave too much powers or too many powers to the president. And the church then was the voice of the voiceless. It was the opposition. And you had very courageous clergymen like the late Manasseh Kuria of the Anglican Church, the late Bishop Alexander Muge of the Anglican Church, the late Archbishop Raphael Ndingimwana Nzeki of the Catholic Church. We had Reverend Mutava Musimi, the Baptist Church, Reverend Timothy Njoya of the PCA. We had Bishop Zacchaeus Okulu of the Catholic Church. These church leaders spoke boldly against the excesses and the oppression of the Moi government in the late 80s. And they gave those who are politically active but who are not in KANU that courage to come out and mobilize Kenyans in protests in 1990 called the Sabasaba, 7th July. And Moi was forced to repeal Section 2A of the then constitution because the 2A did not allow any other political party to exist apart from KANU. So when it was repealed in 1991, other parties were allowed to be registered. And therefore, in 1992, we had a multi-party election. So Ford was registered, and the Democratic Party, led by the late Mwai Kibaki, and then others followed. So we thought, and it was right, that the problem at that time was the constitution. And there was a clamor to change the constitution from 1992. So we come to 1997, and Moi suggests we have minimum reforms because the opposition then said no reforms, no election. So President Moi convinced the opposition parties to have this inter-party parliamentary group, the IPPG, in 1997, just before the 1997 general elections. And they fell for the trap. And of course, KANU and Moi won again. So it took many years until 2010 for us to have the new constitution. But now, even after we have this new constitution from 2013 taking effect and having devolution, we still have the same problems of corruption, abuse of office, abuse of power. So is the problem the constitution? No. The problem is the values that we have as a nation. And this is tackled very clearly in chapter 6 of the Constitution, which is entitled Leadership and Integrity. And that's what the Gen Zs are demanding. They're demanding integrity from our leaders, from the government. That is the problem that we have in Kenya. And that is one of the problems that Gen Zs are fixing in this country. So yes, he has sacked the cabinet, but let those who have served in cabinet be subjected to a lifestyle audit, and those found guilty of corruption, amassing wealth from their positions as cabinet secretaries, be charged and taken to court. And if found guilty, jailed, and let the money be recovered. But corruption has been there in this country from 1963. I remember in the Kibaki government, there was something called the Kroll Report. The Kroll, Kroll, Kroll Report, which investigated the amount of money stashed out of our country by corrupt leaders. And the recommendation was that the government of the day should recover this money from the offshore accounts abroad. I don't know how far that went. And I'm sure since then, of course, you remember the Aror and Kimaro Dam scandal, lost 20 billion shillings, I think just 5 years ago. NYS scandal, many scandals, some not known. Where is that money? Kenya's fourth president, Uhuru Kenyatta, said, I believe in 2021 or 22, in a vernacular radio station, that 2 billion shillings are stolen every day. And he was saying that as president. So he must have been speaking from a point of information that we were losing 2 billion shillings every day to corruption, theft. People are stealing 2 billion every day. That is 60 billion shillings every month. Sorry. Yes, every month. 60 billion. And you say that we need to borrow money to increase taxes? Stop the theft of public money. There is 1.2 trillion shillings stolen every year. Assuming from that year, which Uhuru Kenyatta was saying as president, 2022, 23, 24, those are 3 years. 1.2 times 3, 3.6 trillion shillings stolen. We don't need to borrow. We don't. And we don't even need to increase taxes if that is the money that is being stolen every year, every day, 2 billion shillings. And who is stealing this money? Of course, it's the people who are serving in the government. Have they been arrested? No. Has the money been recovered? I don't know. This is what we are dealing with in Kenya. Blessed Mike, welcome, Mike. The Gen Z revolution is going to change Kenya for the better. Kenya is no longer the same again. Political parties failed Kenyans. They failed us, and that's why the Gen Zs stood up for the whole country. Where was Azimio this year? They could have mobilized Kenyans to protest against the finance bill this year. Where were they? The government compromised Raila Odinga. They are campaigning for him to be the chairperson of the African Union Commission to silence the opposition, which they did. Because for the past 1 year, the opposition was silent. It was not speaking up for the people. It was not exposing the ills in the government. But praise be to God, God raised up the Gen Zs. So Azimio cannot now come and try to ride on the Gen Z revolution. It won't work. So Kenya Kwanza, UDA, Ford Kenya, ANC, ODM, Wiper, Jubilee, they have failed Kenyans. They have failed our children. They have failed the Gen Zs. The Gen Zs have stood up for this country. They know the value of our national flag, of our national anthem. They are patriotic. I think this is the most patriotic generation since the generation that fought for independence. They are willing to die for this country. They were killed with the national flag in their hands. Never seen in this country. Never. Never. They are patriotic. The Gen Zs love this country. And they have proven to us that the politicians don't love Kenya. Parliament does not love this country. I don't know if the president loves this country. The Arab Spring began this way. Young people in 2011 in Tunisia, a young man killed himself, doused himself with petrol because of poverty, unemployment, and that began the Arab Spring. The dictator in Tunisia, Zinedine Ben Ali, he had to flee Tunisia because the young people in Tunisia went out on the streets. The Arab Spring spread to Libya, it spread to Egypt. Again, the young people there, they came out on the streets in Cairo and the Tahrir Square. And the dictator Hosni Mubarak had to flee Egypt, ran away. Closer home here in Sudan, Omar Hassan al-Bashir, a soldier who came into power in 1989 through a coup. Just because of the cost of bread, the young people went out in Khartoum on the streets. They marched there, and Bashir left power. This is what is happening in Kenya now. The Gen Z revolution is live, happening real time before our eyes. We want value for our taxes. We want to see medicine even in the smallest clinic in the village. We want to have doctors down there who are well paid. We want our teachers well paid. Unemployed, there are so many unemployed trained teachers in Kenya, and yet 2 billion shillings are stolen every day. Where is the government? Instead of killing patriotic young Kenyans, they should go after those thieves. Or are they the ones stealing from their own government? Are our leaders the ones stealing from us? It looks like it. We all know the answer anyway. So we don't want a Kenya where the president, the deputy president, and their cabinet steals from us. Where their companies do business with the government. Where their companies push out any other person, you can't get government tenders. And apart from the finance bill, there's another bill called the Conflict of Interest Bill, which came from Parliament last year. And this bill was supposed to make sure that public officers don't do business with the government, with the members of parliament, cabinet secretaries, governors, even the president. But when the bill went to the Senate made amendments to that bill to allow public officers, public servants, to continue doing business with the government. That is where the corruption is. So this is an opportunity to correct our country, to change our country for the better. Those young Kenyans died with the flag in their hands, the Kenyan flag in their hands. They died for this country to be a better country. This government also came up with a model of university financing. They have increased the cost of university education, and now it's around 300,000 shillings per year, from around 30,000 shillings, because the government has been subsidizing university education. Now it means that many of the Gen Zs will not be able to go to university. Their parents cannot simply afford. The government has stopped subsidizing university education. What are they doing? That is killing our future. When other countries are making education almost free, in France, education is free all the way to university. Free. Just show up and study. Can you compete with those countries? No way. Rachel Njoroge, God bless Kenya. Hello, hello, karibu, karibu Rachel. These Gen Zs are beneficiaries of the free primary education of the late President Mwai Kibaki. Because the Gen Zs who were born in 1997 were 6 years old when Kibaki launched the free primary education. They benefited from Mwai Kibaki's vision to make education accessible to almost all children at the primary level. And now they're being denied university education on the basis of cost. The government can be able to subsidize university education as it has been doing. Just stop stealing our money. It's simple. Because they keep on saying, how can we finance our budget? Stop stealing money. That is how. Kenya has enough money. We have enough money to finance our budget and to finance development, to finance education, to finance healthcare. Because our tax base is still very narrow. Not every Kenyan who earns money is paying taxes. So if every income earning Kenyan pays the rightful taxes, we'll have more than enough money. So it's not about the finance bill, it's about corruption, it's about the leadership of this country. It has failed. Simple and clear. The same thing has happening in the counties. We devolved corruption. There's too much corruption in the county governments. So the problem in Kenya is simply corruption and stealing. They keep saying that Kenya is a country under the rule of law, but they don't respect the law. They don't respect the constitution. They don't respect court decisions and court orders. So how can they claim to be under the rule of law, yet the same government is breaking the law? So we just need to implement our constitution the way it is. That is enough. That is enough. Kenya is blessed. We have a very educated population. Our young people are very educated. They're informed. They're exposed to information. They just need a conducive environment for them to thrive, for them to flourish, to exploit all their talents and skills and gifts for this country. They don't want to go outside this country. No, they want to succeed in Kenya. Because what will our engineers develop other countries? Build roads in Saudi Arabia. What should our teachers teach kids in Europe? What should our doctors go and serve people in the USA and in Europe and other countries, Australia or Canada, and our nurses, and leave their fellow Kenyans dying here because of lack of doctors? Doesn't make sense at all. The Gen Z revolution is not about Ruto. It's about Kenya. And it's about Kenyans. And this revolution is divine. It is divine. God can use anyone. And God has chosen to use the Gen Zs in this country to bring positive change, to take Kenya to the next level, higher levels. It's peaceful. It's a peaceful revolution. They're not advocating for violence or armed struggle. So let's get this right. It's a peaceful revolution. Yes. Yes, Rachel. Exactly. Kenya Airways, Kenya Power should be managed properly. Exactly. You have state agencies, parastatals, which have been mismanaged. I think many people don't know that we have something called the Kenya Industrial Estates. That is a parastatal supposed to make, industries, even in the villages, what you call the cottage industries. These are, you go to the village and whatever they can do there, the government puts up a small industry. That's how all these big countries have grown. Talk about China, India, America, England. They grew from cottage industries. But we didn't even see what they do. We have Kenya Airways always in billions of losses every year. Our national carrier. We have Kenya Power, also have been going through losses, and yet it's the sole distributor of electricity in this country. How can they make losses? And they have no competition. So if all these parastatals are managed professionally, we can make money and give Kenyans service for their money. So this revolution is about accountability and service. It's about including every Kenyan in our economy, not having cartels or a cabal of people just around the president who are the only ones benefiting from this country, the ones who are not making really, but stealing money, making deals, selling our national assets to foreigners for kickbacks, carrying money in bags, demanding $1 million bribes or kickbacks. We have said no. Enough is enough. We are taking our country back from this political vultures, cartels, thieves, stealing from their own children, stealing our future. You will not steal our future. You will not kill our children now or tomorrow. You will not kill this country. So it's not just about Ruto must go. It's about Kenya must rise up, must develop, and develop for everyone. Led by the Constitution. This country is a democracy governed by the Constitution. The first stanza of our national anthem is a prayer. And the Gen Zs have been singing our national anthem everywhere they go, even in their protests. This revolution is divine, it's God-driven. It can't be stopped by bullets or tear gas. It is beyond Ruto, it's beyond Raila Odinga, it's beyond me and you. It's beyond the police, it's beyond the army. It's beyond America or any other nation in this world. This revolution will reach its intended end. And it will bring its intended results in a peaceful manner. I conclude with the Bible. So I've begun this story with my past. I was an activist in Bunge la Mwananchi, and one of our young people who were killed was a member of Bunge la Mwananchi, Erickson Chalo Mutisia, 25 years old. 25 years old. He was running his own butchery in Hamza, in Eastlands. And he went there on that day, June 25th, with his white overalls. And he was shot dead in his neck. I have come here on his behalf because I was also a member of Bunge la Mwananchi in my youthful days. And on the behalf of all the other young patriots who were killed, and on my own behalf, as a registered voter, as a taxpayer, as a Kenyan citizen, we must change our country now. This is the chance given to us right now. We can't afford to waste this opportunity. So I'll read from the book of Daniel chapter 5. As it is, Belshazzar the king made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in the presence of the 1,000. While he tasted the wine, Belshazzar gave the command to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple which had been in Jerusalem, that the king and his lords, his wives and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought the gold vessels that had been taken from the temple of the house of God, which had been in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze and iron, wood and stone. In the same hour, the fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his hips were loosened, and his knees knocked against each other. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spoke, saying to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and tells me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, and he shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Now all the king's wise men came, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king its interpretation. Then King Belshazzar was troubled greatly. His countenance was changed, and his lords were astonished. The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came to the banquet hall, and the queen spoke, saying, O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts trouble you, nor let your countenance change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy God. And in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers, inasmuch as an excellent spirit, knowledge, understanding, interpreting dreams, solving riddles, and explaining enigmas were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will give the interpretation. Then Daniel was brought in before the king, and the king spoke and said to Daniel, are you that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, whom my father the king brought from Judah? I have heard of you, that the Spirit of God is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now, the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known to me its interpretation, but they could not give the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of you, that you can give interpretations and explain enigmas. Now, if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing to the king, and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom and majesty, glory, and honor. And because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whomever he wished, he executed. Whomever he wished, he kept alive. Whomever he wished, he set up. And whomever he wished, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up, and his spirit was hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Then he was driven from the sons of men. His heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with grass, with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men and appoints over it whoever he chooses. But you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although you knew all this. And you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. They have brought the vessels of his house before you, and you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, bronze and iron, wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know. And the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you have not glorified. Then the fingers of the hand were sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the inscription that was written: Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. This is the interpretation of each word. Mene, God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Peres, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and they clothed Daniel with purple and put a chain of gold around his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler of the kingdom. That very night, Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain. He was killed. And Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. The word of the Lord Almighty. Daniel chapter 5. The writing is on the wall. President William Ruto. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. God has numbered your government and finished it. God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. God has finished your government. You have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Because if the cabinet has failed, you too, Mr. President, you have failed. Your kingdom has been divided and given to others. Mr. President, the writing is on the wall. God has numbered your government and God has finished it. Nothing you can do can salvage your government. The opposition cannot save you or save your government. God has finished your government. Daniel chapter 5. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin is the judgment from God concerning you. The game is over. The Gen Z revolution has just begun. God bless Kenya. God bless the Gen Z, our youth, our children. God bless our flag, which is behind me. God bless the families of those young patriotic Kenyans who were shot dead by their own government. God bless his servants in this country. And may God bless us in the days ahead. Because in the days ahead, God will show his mighty hand in Kenya. Then the world will know that it is God who gives power and takes power away. That God rules in the kingdoms and governments of men. And that you cannot use the name of God in vain for your own interests. Good night from Nairobi, Kenya. Kenya is never the same again. Shalom.